Hmm. This is not where we ended last time. This is like people were. I think that is the end of my daily. Accept another. Alright, this is where we'll start then. Welcome to the 106th Henry George Daily Devotional. This is, we continue reading Progress and Poverty and Inquiry into the, in, into the Cause of Industrial Depressions and the Increase of Want with the Increase of Wealth, The Remedy by Henry George, published in 1879 in San Francisco, New York, I don't know, America. We are in Chapter 10, The Law of Human Progress. Chapter 2, Difference in Civilization. To What Do? And this is, of course, the third time we've been reading from it on these devotionals. Taking our sweet time. I just don't want it to end. I haven't decided if I want to keep doing daily devotionals and reading through George's other books. But I kind of think why not? Because I think it's a good habit to read for half an hour-ish a day. I have been doing a bunch of other reading of Christopher England's Land and Liberty, The Crafting of Modern Henry George and the Crafting of Modern Liberalism, about the single taxers throughout the 20th, well, late 19th and 20th century. Um, and that is, I mean, I'm no longer shocked, but I definitely was at how pervasive the single tax and Henry George movement was and what positions of power they reached. I mean, I just read about Woodrow Wilson creating a defense council leading up to World War One, and two of the four people on the defense council were Georgists. Um, George Creel, I think, and Newton Baker, and the other two people were not named. Um, and then there's a bunch of other things. All right, but we're here to read Progress and Poverty. George writes, pretty sure this is where we go. And it seems to me that the influence of this social net or environment will explain what is so often taken as proof of race differences. The difficulty which less civilized races show in receiving higher civilization, and the manner in which some of them melt away before it, just as one social environment persists, so does it render it difficult or impossible for those subject to it to accept another. The Chinese character is fixed, if that of any people is. Yet the Chinese in California acquire American modes of working, trading, the use of machinery, etc., with such facility as to prove that they have no lack of flexibility or natural capacity. That they do not change in other respects is due to the Chinese environment that still persists and still surrounds them. Coming from China, they look forward to return to China, and live while here in a little China of their own, just as the Englishmen in India maintain a little England. It is not merely that we naturally seek association with those who share our peculiarities, and that thus language, religion, and custom tend to persist where individuals are not absolutely isolated, but that these differences provoke an external pressure which compels such association. These obvious principles fully account for all the phenomena which are seen in the meeting of one stage or bodies of culture with another. Without resort to the theory of ingrained differences, For instance, as comparative philology has shown, the Hindu is of the same race as his English conqueror. I don't I don't understand. I remember reading this before. Uh, okay, in one sense, all humans are the same race. In the context of this time, and I mean, racism is such a. All right, so if we mean by race, I don't know what we mean by race. I don't know what George means by race. I guess he's saying that the Hindus, which like what the Hindu, I don't know. I've always just Hindued that who who are the Hindus? Is that just somebody who, yeah. Okay, it is the religion. Oh no, it wasn't the religion. It's anyone from India. So the Indian, yes, Indians. He's saying like Anglo-Saxon and Indian come from a more recent uh, derivative of the human diaspora or whatever. Anyway, the Hindu is of the same race as his English conqueror, and individual instances have abundantly shown that if he could be placed completely and exclusively in the English environment, which, as before stated, could be thoroughly done only by placing infants in English families in such a way that neither they, as they grow up, nor those around them, would be conscious of any distinction. One generation would be all required to thoroughly implant European civilization. But the progress of English ideas and habits in India must be necessarily very slow, because they meet there the web of ideas and habits constantly perpetuated through an immense population and interlaced with every act of life. Mr. Bagehot, we looked that up, the pronunciation, Physics and Politics, endeavors to explain the reason why barbarians waste away before our civilization, while they did not before that of the ancients, by assuming why they waste away before our civilization, while they did not before that of the ancients. He does this by assuming that the progress of civilization has given us tougher physical constitutions, and alluding to the fact that there is no lament in any classical writer for the barbarians, but that everywhere the barbarian endured the contact with the Roman, and the Roman allied himself to the barbarian. He says, Savages in the first year of the Christian era were pretty much what they were in the 1800th, and if they stood the contact of ancient civilized men and cannot stand ours, it follows that our race is presumably tougher than the ancient, for we have to bear and do bear the seeds of greater diseases than the ancients carried with them. We may use, perhaps, the unvarying savage as a meter to gauge the vigor of the constitution to whose contact he is exposed. Mr. Bagehot does not attempt to explain how it is that 1800 years ago civilization did not give the like relative advantage over barbarism that it does now. But there is no use of talking about that, or of the lack of proof that the human constitution has been a whit improved. To anyone who has seen how the contact of our civilization affects the inferior races, a much readier though less flattering explanation will occur. It is not because our constitutions are naturally tougher than those of the savage that diseases which are comparatively innocuous to us are certain death to him. It is that we know and have the means of treating those diseases, while he is destitute of both of knowledge and means. The same diseases with which the scum of civilization that floats in its advance inoculates the savage would prove as destructive to civilized men if they knew no better than to let them run, as he in his ignorance has to let them run. That's the savage. In his ignorance, has to let them run. And as a matter of fact, they were as destructive until we found out how to treat them. And not merely this, but the effect of the impingement of civilization upon barbarism is to weaken the power of the savage without bringing him into the conditions that give power to the civilized man. While his habits and customs still tend to persist, and do persist as far as they can, the conditions to which they were adapted are forcibly changed. He is a hunter in a land stripped of game, a warrior deprived of his arms, and called on to plead in legal technicalities. He is not merely placed between cultures, but as Mr. Bagehot says of the European half-breeds in India, he is placed between moralities, and learns the vices of civilization without its virtues. He loses his accustomed means of subsistence, he loses self-respect, he loses morality. He deteriorates and dies away. The miserable creature who may be seen hanging around frontier towns or railroad stations, ready to beg or steal or solicit a viler commerce, are not fair representatives of the Indian before the white man had encroached upon his hunting grounds. And here we mean Native Americans. They have lost the strength and virtues of not Hindus. They have lost the strength and virtues of their former state without gaining those of a higher. In fact, civilization as it pushes the red man shows no virtues. To the Anglo-Saxon of the frontier, as a rule, the aborigine has no rights which the white man is bound to respect. He is impoverished, misunderstood, cheated, and abused. He dies out as under similar conditions we should die out. He disappears before civilization as the Britons disappeared before Saxon barbarism. The true reason why there is no lament in any classic writer for the barbarian, but that the Roman civilization assimilated instead of destroying, is, I take it, to be found not only in the fact that the ancient civilization was much nearer akin to the barbarians which it met, but in the more important fact that it was not extended as ours has been. It was carried forward, not by an advancing line of colonists, but by conquests which merely reduced the new province to general subjection, leaving the social and generally the political organization of the people to a great degree unimpaired, so that without shattering or deterioration, the process of assimilation went on. In a somewhat similar way, the civilization of Japan seems to be now assimilating itself to European civilization. Yeah, this is all, when was Wounded Knee? That was in 1890. So here George is writing in, 1870s, late 1870s. This is published in 79. He's writing at the time before some of the worst. I mean, is this considered? Worst Native American massacres. Fetterman fight. I guess it's Bear River Massacre, 1863. So these had occurred. Fetterman fight, Bear River Massacre. Wounded Knee was 300. Bear River is 350. Yeah. So there have definitely been some massacres, I see, and yet more still continued. All right. In America, the Anglo-Saxon has exterminated instead of civilizing the Indian, simply because he has not brought the Indian into his environment, nor yet has the contact been in such a way as to induce or permit the Indian web of habitual thought and custom to be changed rapidly enough to meet the new conditions into which he has been brought by the proximity of new and powerful neighbors. Okay, couldn't be converted quickly enough, I guess. That there is no innate impediment to the reception of our civilization by these uncivilized races has been shown over and over again in individual cases. And it has likewise been shown, so far as the experiments have been permitted to go, by the Jesuits in Paraguay, the Franciscans in California, and the Protestant missionaries on some of the Pacific islands. The assumption of physical improvement in the race within any time of which we have knowledge is utterly without warrant, and within the time of which Mr. Bagehot speaks it is absolutely disproved. We know from classic statues, from the burdens carried and the marches made by ancient soldiers, from the records of runners and the feats of gymnasts, that neither in proportions nor strength has the race improved within 2,000 years. Now, it definitely hasn't improved much or anything, but I I think there is a kind of general agreement, and of course, it may be completely due to uh, diet, that we are National Geographic. Are we taller and colder? Yeah, taller, colder, and fatter. I guess I can't read it. And they may be all tied together. If your basic body is not 98.6, now people are, it's pretty agreed upon, I guess, that we're 97.6-ish. If you don't run as hot, you're not going to burn as many calories. So you might get fatter if you eat the same amount. But maybe also if you're taller, this is now me just guessing. That stuff was said in some of the articles I read. But clearly if all my systems expected me to be 5'8", and then somehow my body got to be 5'11", then maybe it's not maybe that heat has had to, be distributed over a greater area, volume. But that's assuming that whatever controls your sort of height wouldn't control whatever systems keep you warm or regulate your body temperature, regulate your basal metabolic rate, your energy. I don't know. And it's also not clear if those causes are purely from the like food environment, or just not even just food, just the environment of uh, a of the modern civilization that I was raised in. The microplastics stretching me out. All right, George continues. But the assumption of mental improvement, which is even more confidently and generally made, is still more preposterous. As poets, artists, architects, philosophers, rhetoricians, statesmen, or soldiers, can modern civilization show individuals of greater mental power than can the ancient. There is no use in recalling names, every schoolboy knows them. For our models and personifications of mental power, we go back to the ancients, and if we can for a moment imagine the possibility of what is held by that oldest and most widespread of all beliefs, the belief which Lessing declared on this account the most probably true, though he accepted it on metaphysical grounds, And suppose Homer or Virgil, Demosthenes or Cicero, Alexander, Hannibal or Caesar, Plato or Lucretius, Euclid or Aristotle as re-entering this life again in the 19th century. Can we suppose that they would show any inferiority to the men of today? Or if we take any period since the classic age, even the darkest, or any previous period of which we know anything, shall we not find men who in the conditions and degree of knowledge of their times showed mental power of as high an order as men show now? And among the less advanced races do we not today, whenever our attention is called to them, find men who in their conditions exhibit mental qualities as great as civilization can show? Did the invention of the railroad, coming when it did, prove any greater inventive power than did the invention of the wheelbarrow when wheelbarrows were not? We of modern civilization are raised far above those who have preceded us and those of the less advanced races who are our contemporaries. But it is because we stand on a pyramid, not that we are taller. What the yeah, yeah, Isaac Newton said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Um, we stand on a pyramid, not that we are taller. For what the centuries have done for us is not to increase our stature, but to build up a structure on which we may plant our feet. Let me repeat. I do not mean to say that all men possess the same capacities or are mentally alike any more than I mean to say that they are physically alike. Among all the countless millions who have come and gone on the earth, there were probably never two who exactly, physically or mentally, were exact counterparts. I added an extra exactly in there. Nor yet do I mean to say that there are not as clearly marked race differences in mind as there are clearly marked race differences in body. I do not deny the influence of heredity in transmitting peculiarities of mind in the same way, and possibly to the same degree, as bodily peculiarities are transmitted. But nevertheless, there is, it seems to me, a common standard and natural symmetry of mind as there is of body, toward which all deviations tend to return. The conditions under which we fall may produce such distortions as the Flatheads produce by compressing the heads of their infants, or the Chinese by binding their daughters' feet. But as Flathead babies continue to be born with naturally shaped heads and Chinese babies with naturally shaped feet, so does nature seem to revert to the normal mental type. A child no more inherits his father's knowledge than he inherits his father's glass eye or artificial leg. The child of the most ignorant parents may become a pioneer of science or a leader of thought. But this is the great fact with which we are concerned, that the differences between the people of communities in different places and at different times, which we call differences of civilization, are not differences which inhere in the individuals, but differences which inhere in the society. They are not, as Herbert Spencer holds, differences resulting from differences in the unit, but that they are differences resulting from the conditions under which these units are brought in the society. In short, I take the explanation of the differences which distinguish communities to be this, that each society, small or great, necessarily weaves for itself a web of knowledge, beliefs, customs, language, tastes, institutions, and laws. And into this web, woven by each society, or rather into these webs, for each community above the simplest is made up of minor societies which overlap and interlace each other. The individual is received at birth and continues until his death. This is the matrix, in which the mind unfolds and from which it takes its stamp. This we have to appreciate his busting out. This is the matrix in which the mind unfolds and from which it takes its stamp. He wrote this before the movie The Matrix came out. 100 years, 120 years before The Matrix came out. This is the way in which customs and religions and prejudices and tastes and languages grow up and are perpetuated. This is the way that skill is transmitted and knowledge is stored up, and the discoveries of one time made the common stock and stepping stone of the next. Though it is this that often offers the most serious obstacles to progress, it is this that makes progress possible. It is this that enables any schoolboy in our time to learn in a few hours more of the universe than Ptolemy knew, that places the most humdrum scientist far above the level reached by the great mind of Aristotle. This is to the race what memory is to the individual. Our wonderful arts, our far-reaching science, our marvelous inventions, they have come through this. Human progress goes on as the advances made by one generation are in this way secured as the common property of the next, and made the starting point for new advances. Pretty inspiring. All right. See you next time.